The village of Ugbekun had always been a quiet place, a pocket of slow time nestled in the heart of Benin. Life moved like the rustle of palm fronds of wind, gently, predictably. Everyone knew everyone, and gossip flowed faster than the village stream. In the midst of that silence lived a woman named Grace. Once, Grace had laughter in her eyes and melody in her step. She had married Edward, her childhood sweetheart, a kind man with big dreams and strong arms. Together, they built a modest mud house at the edge of the village, beneath a mango tree that gave them shade and sweet fruit every harvest. They had 3 children, Daniel, Mary, and Joy, and they dreamed of raising them into something greater than the village ever offered. But dreams, like fragile clay pots, sometimes shatter too soon. Edward died one rainy morning, the kind of rain that doesn't just fall, it weeps from the heavens. He had gone to the forest to cut firewood and never returned. Villagers found his body hours later, crushed under a fallen tree. Grace stood beside his casket, too stunned to cry. That was the day the real rain began, the kind that fell inside her heart and never stopped. Left alone, Grace did everything she could to keep her children alive. She fetched firewood and hawked it from compound to compound. She washed clothes for coins that barely bought salt. She weeded strangers' farms under the blazing sun. Her back bent, her fingers blistered. Her skin grew darker, her bones thinner, but she never stopped. Some days they ate once. Some days they drank water and went to bed hungry. Years rolled by. Daniel, the eldest, grew into a tall, quiet young man. He worked in farms for meager pay, sometimes only a few yams and rusty coins. Mary and Joy, graceful girls with eyes once filled with childhood sparkle, now walked from one end of Ugbekun to the other hawking mangoes and oranges under the unforgiving sun. Their dresses were torn at the hem, their slippers barely holding together with twine. And the villagers, those same people who once blessed Grace on her wedding day, now whispered and laughed behind her back. "Look at Grace's children," they would say, spitting the words like venom. "Their mates are in the city, driving cars and wearing lace. These ones look like they wrestle with ghosts every night." Every word was a dagger. Each evening, Grace would lie on her raffia mat, staring at the leaking roof as the night breeze whispered through broken windows. She would clutch her hands to her chest, her lips trembling with prayers. "God, what did I do wrong? Why must my children suffer like this?" She asked, but heaven stayed silent. One night, after Mary returned from hawking with cracked feet, and Joy dropped to the floor from hunger, something inside Grace snapped. It was past midnight. The village was asleep, except for the distant bark of a dog. Grace stood up slowly, her knees weak, her heart pounding. She wrapped her faded wrapper tightly around her body and stepped into the cold night. The moon hung low like a silver eye watching her silently. She walked through narrow footpaths until she reached a compound near the village square. She knocked, then knocked again. The door creaked open. A woman stood there, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Her name was Helen, one of the few friends Grace still had. She tied a second wrapper across her chest and blinked in confusion. "Grace? It's late. What's wrong?" Grace didn't answer. She fell to her knees on the dusty floor, tears streaming down her face. "I'm tired, Helen," she whispered. "I'm tired of watching my children suffer. I'm tired of begging God and hearing nothing. Please help me." Helen closed the door quietly and pulled Grace up to a wooden chair. Her face tightened with pity. "Things are hard everywhere," Helen said slowly. "Even I'm managing, but—" She paused, looked around as if someone might be listening, then lowered her voice. "There's a place, very far, inside the forest. A man, a spirit guide. He helps people. If you want your children to be rich, if you truly want them to escape this life, he can help. But Grace," she looked her friend straight in the eye, "you must be ready for anything. There's no turning back once you go." Grace did not flinch. "I'm ready. I'll die for them to have a better life." The 2 women sat in silence, the air between them heavy with decisions that could never be undone. At dawn, just before the first cock crowed, they prepared for the journey. They tied wrappers around their waists, carried small bottles of water, and left before the sun rose. The walk was long and treacherous. They passed the last compound, crossed abandoned farmlands, and entered the thick forest where the trees whispered secrets. The deeper they went, the darker it became. Birds screeched above. The wind howled like a warning. But Grace never turned back. She thought of Daniel's shaking hands as he gave her 2 tubers of yam. She thought of Mary's cracked lips and Joy's hollow eyes. Each memory pushed her forward. After what felt like hours, they reached a wide open space deep within the forest. A strange chill filled the air, too cold for such a hot day. At the center of the clearing was a hut covered in black cloth. Strange symbols were drawn on the ground. A tall man, draped in red robes, sat on a stool. His face was hidden behind a cowl-studded mask. He did not move when they arrived, but when he spoke, his voice echoed like many voices layered over one another. "Grace, you have come to seek your children's prosperity." She fell to her knees. "Yes, master. Please, help me. I'll give anything." The man nodded slowly. "They will have wealth, in abundance, but the price is heavy." Grace looked up, her voice trembling. "I accept, whatever it is." The master rose to his feet. "From today, you will never enter your children's homes. You will never eat their food or accept their gifts. You must become a beggar. Every coin you collect will grow their riches. The day you stop begging, their wealth will begin to vanish." Grace's lips quivered. Her heart split. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel. "Mary, Joy, I accept," she whispered. The wind roared. The earth trembled. Her sacrifice had just begun. The cold in the clearing did not match the weather. Grace could feel the chill sinking into her bones, though sweat still clung to her neck from the long trek. The strange man in the red robe remained still, cowrie mask gleaming under the weak sunlight that filtered to the tall trees of the forbidden forest. Beside her, Helen shifted nervously. "Are you sure, Grace?" she whispered. "Once you agree, there's no going back." But Grace did not respond. Her knees were already buried in the dust of the clearing, her hands clutched tightly together. In her mind, her children's faces danced. Daniel's weary eyes, Mary's tired legs, Joy's forced smiles. They didn't deserve the life they were living. If her suffering could change their destiny, she would bear it all. "I accept," she said again, louder this time. "Tell me what I must do." The man in red, the master, stepped forward. His voice reverberated around them like wind bouncing off stone. "You must give up your life, but not by death. You will become nothing. A beggar. Dust. From the dust, your children will rise." Grace nodded slowly. "I understand." He continued, his tone deeper. "You will beg from strangers on the streets. You will wear rags. You will eat crumbs. And you must never, never accept gifts, food, or comfort from your children. No clothes, no coins, no shelter. Do you hear me?" Grace's voice trembled, but she answered, "Yes." The master lifted his staff, carved from a tree no one in Ugbekun could name. "If you disobey, even by accident, their riches will begin to rot, slowly, quietly, until they return to the same suffering you tried to save them from." The word slammed into her like a blow, but still she did not move. "And one more," he said, voice now quiet. "You must never reveal the secret. Not to them. Not to anyone. Your silence is the final offering." Grace's shoulders dropped. Her chest heaved. "I will never speak of it." The master turned. He touched her forehead with the tip of the staff. The moment it made contact, a wind like 1,000 voices swirled around the clearing. The trees bent as though bowing to her sacrifice. The dust lifted from the ground and spun in a wild circle around her. Helen stepped back in fear. Grace closed her eyes. "You are sealed," the master intoned. "Your tears will become rivers of wealth. Your pain will purchase their comfort. May your ashes cover their crowns." Then everything went silent. When Grace opened her eyes, the clearing was empty. The master was gone. The wind had stopped. And in her soul, she knew something permanent had just shifted. They made the long journey back to Ugbekun in silence. The air felt heavier now. Grace walked as if the very ground had changed beneath her feet. The forest no longer frightened her. Her fear had already been buried with her dignity. By the time they arrived at the edge of the village, dawn was breaking. A rooster crowed in the distance. The same people who mocked her every day were beginning to wake, draw water, sweep compounds. Nothing had changed in the village, but everything had changed in Grace. Helen stopped just before they reached her house. "Are you all right?" Grace only nodded. "Thank you, Helen, for everything. You're sure about this?" Helen asked, eyes filled with uncertainty. "I already made the choice," Grace whispered. "Now I have to live it." She turned and walked away, her wrapper flapping softly in the morning breeze. 3 days passed. On the third morning, Daniel was sent to help an old man in the neighboring village clear a small piece of farmland. It was work he'd done many times for nothing more than a meal or a handful of yams. But this time, after he finished, the old man stood beside him and said, "Young man, you work like someone who owns the world." Daniel smiled weakly. "I only work to feed my mother and sisters, sir." The man looked at him with piercing eyes. "I want to bless you. Take this bag of seeds, these tools, and fertilizers. Go and start your own farm. I've already spoken to the chief. You've been granted land." Daniel blinked. "Me? But, sir, I have no money. No help." The old man chuckled. "You have honesty and strength. That's enough." He handed Daniel a brown envelope filled with cash. "Go and build something. You're ready." Meanwhile, back in Ugbekun, Mary was hawking fruits under the boiling sun. Her slippers had torn again, and she had tied them with raffia to keep going. Just as she passed a roadside canteen, a white SUV pulled up. A woman stepped out, elegant, richly dressed, her makeup flawless. "Who owns these fruits?" the woman asked. Mary, unsure what to say, knelt quickly. "It's me, Ma." The woman studied her. "What's your name?" "Mary." "Come with me, Mary. I need someone to help manage a fruit business in Benin City. You look honest." Mary's hands trembled. "Nah, I don't have certificate. I didn't finish school." The woman smiled. "Your honesty is your certificate. Come, I'll teach you." At the same time, Joy, the youngest, had gone to the stream to fetch water. On her way back, she saw a woman crying beside the water. Her bag had fallen in. Money and phone lost. Without a second thought, Joy dropped her basin and jumped into the water. She searched until she retrieved the bag. The woman was speechless. You saved everything." Joy smiled. "It's okay, Ma." "What's your name?" "Joy." "Would you like to go to school?" "Yes, Ma, but we have no money." "I'll sponsor you, from now until university. Let me take care of that." That week, the tide turned. For the first time, villagers began whispering something different. "Have you seen Grace's children? God has remembered them. This is not ordinary, oh. Maybe she went somewhere." They started calling Daniel chairman. They nodded when Mary passed. They clapped for joy at the stream. And Grace? She sat inside her small mud hut, refusing the food they sent her, refusing the clothes. She smiled through her tears, because she knew every miracle they received was another brick added to the mansion she had built with her own sorrow. The village of Ugbekun had never witnessed such transformation in one family. Not like this. For years, Grace and her children had been the subject of whispers, mockery, and pity. But now, the very mouths that ridiculed her began to bless her name from afar, though she still lived among them in the same crumbling mud house. Each day, the changes grew louder. Daniel, now owner of a small farm on the outskirts of Ugbekun, walked with a new sense of confidence. He wore second-hand jeans and polished shoes, not because he wanted to show off, but because opportunity had found him. His yams flourished faster than anyone else's in the area, and his vegetables attracted traders from nearby towns. People began to call him Oga Farmer. Mary, once mocked for her cracked heels and worn tray of oranges, now wore neat gowns and flat shoes. She moved to Benin City, working for the elegant woman who had offered her a job in a fruit warehouse. She learned to manage inventory, keep records, and even help with small business deals. The city changed her, but not her heart. Her boss once told her, "You're different, Mary. You carry gratitude like a crown." Joy, the youngest, adjusted her new life in boarding school like someone born into it. Her sponsor, the woman from the stream, sent her supplies every term and called her my little miracle. Joy was already dreaming of becoming a nurse, someone who could help others, just like she'd been helped. Their lives were no longer a testimony of lack, but of grace, ironic, since their mother bore that name in silence, alone. Back in Ugbekun, Grace continued to walk through the dust. She rose early, before the sun, and tied a threadbare wrapper across her chest. She rubbed ashes on her face and carried her plastic begging bowl. She walked slowly, barefoot, to the village market square, where she would sit by the mango tree and whisper softly, "Please, anything you can give." Some villagers looked at her with pity. Some ignored her. Some whispered things that pierced her soul. Is that not Grace? Her children are now rich. She must be mad. Look at her, still begging. Maybe the money made her lose her mind. Grace heard everything, but she smiled and said nothing. Every coin that dropped into her bowl, every scrap of bread left at her feet, these were not charity to her. They were currency in a sacred transaction, a secret agreement made in a forest where trees bowed to tears. One Saturday afternoon, a brown delivery van arrived in Ugbekun. It stopped in front of Grace's compound. Inside the van were bags of rice, cartons of milk, boxes of clothes, medicines, and 3 pairs of new slippers. The driver handed a parcel to Grace and said, "Madam, from your children. They say you should prepare. Next weekend, they're coming to carry you to the city." Grace thanked the man, but took only the note inside the parcel. When he left, she sat on her raffia mat, stared at the offerings, and whispered, "I can't touch these. If I do, everything will end." That evening, when the sun melted into the horizon, she took the items one by one and gave them out to neighbors. Some tried to refuse, shocked by her generosity. But Mama Daniel, one woman said, "This is for you." Grace smiled gently. "Please, take it. I'm fine." They didn't understand, but they took the items anyway. The following weekend, true to their word, all 3 children returned to Ugbekun, this time not with baskets of fruit, but in a gleaming black car with tinted windows. Mary sat in the back with Joy, while Daniel drove. They arrived with laughter and excitement, carrying fresh clothes and soft blankets. When they stepped into Grace's compound and saw her sitting by the doorstep, their joy quickly turned concern. Her hair was untidy. Her wrapper was worn thin. Her feet were dry and cracked. "Mama," Daniel dropped his knees. "Please come with us. We've built a house in the city. We have doctors. You'll sleep on a big bed. There's air conditioner." Grace forced a smile. "I'm fine here." "No, Mama," Mary said, holding her hand. "Let us take care of you now. You've done enough." "Idohan," she whispered, calling Mary by her middle name. "Let them laugh again. I will be fine." "But, Mama," "People mocked you here," Joy added, tears in her eyes. "We want you to smile, too." "I'm already smiling," Grace said softly, though her eyes were wet. "Just seeing you all happy, that's enough." Daniel clenched his fists. "We'll come every weekend then. We'll bring the village chief and hold Thanksgiving for you." Grace only nodded. "I will be waiting." That evening, she stood by the roadside, her wrapper flapping gently in the wind as the car drove away. She whispered a prayer as their vehicle disappeared. "May your riches never dry, even if I must beg forever." What Grace didn't know was that someone else had watched that exchange. Mr. Thomas, a used shoe seller who had moved from Ugbekun to Benin City years ago, happened to be visiting the village that weekend. He watched the way the children dressed, the way the neighbors now treated Grace like royalty, and the way she still walked barefoot to the market the next morning. Later that week, as he arranged his shoes at a small city stall, he looked up and saw a familiar figure walking past. She was in a faded wrapper, carrying a plastic bowl. Mr. Thomas squinted, heart racing. "Wait, is that not?" He left the stall and followed her for a few steps. "Madam Grace," he called gently. She paused but did not look up. She only stretched her bowl forward. Mr. Thomas's heart broke. This woman's children are rich. Why is she like this? He murmured to his assistant. That night, he called Daniel. Daniel, it's me, Thomas. I saw your mother today in the city. She was begging. Daniel stood up so fast he knocked over his chair. What? Where? Near my shoe stall, just by Upper Mission Road. She looked, she didn't even recognize me. Daniel's heart pounded. Thank you, Uncle. When he hung up, he picked up his keys. I'm bringing Mama home, he said. And with that, the next chapter of their lives, of pain, confrontation, and a truth too deep to explain, began to unfold. Daniel drove like a man possessed, his fingers tight on the steering wheel, his heart louder than the engine. His mother, Grace, begging on the streets of Benin City? The thought haunted him. What would people say? That he, a successful farmer and businessman, had abandoned his own mother? He arrived at Upper Mission Road just before sunset. The streets bustled with traders packing their wares. The air smelled of roasted plantain, diesel fumes, and burning hope. He scanned the crowd from behind his tinted windows. Then he saw her. Across the road, beneath a mango tree near a roasted yam cellar, was a familiar figure. Thin, wrapped in a faded cloth, barefoot and bent. She stretched a hand out silently, a plastic bowl shaking in her grip. Daniel's world froze. He threw the door open and ran. Mama, it's me. It's Daniel. She turned toward him, and for a moment, their eyes met. But instead of embracing him, Grace turned and ran, barefoot, into a narrow alleyway behind the buildings. Mama, please. Daniel chased after her. He dodged Okadas and pushed through crowds. But she was fast, too fast for a woman her age. She disappeared between alleyways, swallowed by the labyrinth of the city. He stood in the middle of the road, chest heaving, tears running down his cheeks. Mama, why are you running from me? Back home that evening, Daniel called Mary in joy. She ran, he said in a shaky voice. I saw her. She ran away from me. The next morning, they arrived. Mary wore a plain dress, her eyes swollen. Joy clutched her backpack, silent for the first time in years. Together, the three siblings drove through the streets searching, markets, alleys, bus parks, until finally, on the third day, they found her. She was sitting under the same mango tree, whispering, Please, anything you can give. They didn't give her a chance to run. Mary rushed to one side. Joy grabbed the other. Daniel stood in front of her, weeping. Mama, please, he begged. Come with us. Let us take care of you. Let us love you. Grace's lips quivered. Her bowl dropped to the ground. I don't belong there, she whispered. You belong with us. Mary cried. You are our mother. Before she could protest, Daniel bent low and scooped her into his arms. She didn't fight. She just cried. Back at Daniel's mansion in the heart of Benin, the gates opened slowly. The guard saluted as the car rolled in. Rebecca, Daniel's wife, ran out, her eyes wide. Mama, she shouted, running forward with open arms. But Grace wasn't smiling. She stared at the compound, its marble tiles, silver gate, flowered walkways, as though they were forbidden. Inside, they showed her the guest room. The bed was made with clean white sheets. A bowl of yam porridge and juice sat on a tray. A fan whirred gently overhead. Grace sat on the cold floor. She didn't touch the food, didn't speak, didn't even lie down. Mama, at least eat something, Rebecca pleaded. Just rest. But Grace only shook her head. I can't. That night, as the moonlight bathed the mansion, something dark moved through the air. The curtains fluttered though no wind blew. Inside the guest room, Grace dozed for a few minutes. In her sleep, she heard footsteps, then a voice, cold, familiar, echoing like wind in a tunnel. Grace. She opened her eyes in terror. Standing at the edge of the room was the master. His red robe trailed across the tiles like smoke. His cowering mask glowed faintly in the dark. Grace dropped to her knees. No, master, please. His voice boomed across the room. You have disobeyed. I didn't eat anything. I didn't take anything, she cried. They brought me here by force. You sleep on their bed. You breathe their cold air. You lie within their walls. Comfort is luxury. And you are forbidden from comfort. I didn't mean to, she whispered. But he vanished before she could plead further. The room went still. Only the soft hum of the air conditioner remained. The next morning, chaos broke out. Daniel's phone rang just as he was preparing for a business meeting. "Sir," his warehouse manager cried. "Fire? Sir, the main warehouse is burning." "What? Which warehouse?" "The one with all your fertilizers and storage machines. Everything is gone." Daniel dropped the phone. At the same time, Mary was in her office in Benin when her boss called her. "Mary, I'm sorry. We've had too many complaints from clients. We'll have to suspend you for now. Take some time off." "But, sir," she stammered. "Please, just go." She stepped out of the office, her chest heavy with confusion. Back at the mansion, Joy sat on the couch reading when she began to itch. At first, it was mild, but within minutes, her skin began to swell with strange rashes, boils that broke and bled. She screamed. Rebecca rushed in and froze. "Daniel, Mary, come quickly." They gathered around her as she shivered. Her lips turned pale. Her voice faded to a whisper. Then silence. They laid her on the couch, weeping and terrified. Behind the locked door of the guest room, Grace sat on the floor, her ear pressed to the wall. She heard everything. The fire, the job, the illness. She rose to her feet and banged on the door. "David, Mary, open the door." From the hallway, Daniel approached. Shaken, he unlocked the door. Grace burst out and ran straight to Joy's side. Her youngest daughter lay still, eyes barely moving. Grace dropped beside her and screamed. I told you not to bring me here." Rebecca knelt beside her. "Mama, what's going on?" Grace looked up, her face drenched with tears. "I can't hold it anymore." Everyone went still. "What do you mean?" Daniel asked. Grace closed her eyes. And then, with trembling lips, she spoke. "I went into the forest," she began, her voice thin and haunted. "I met a man, a spirit, the master. I begged him to help you, to give you success, riches, opportunity. He agreed, but there was a price." "What price?" Mary whispered. Grace's voice broke. "That I must never enjoy what you have, never enter your homes, never eat your food, never sleep in your beds. I must become a beggar. As long as I suffer, you prosper. But the day I stop..." She pointed toward the couch where Joy lay. "Everything begins to fall apart." The room was silent, too silent. Then Mary burst into tears. "You did this for us?" Daniel stepped back, mouth open. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I wasn't allowed. I wasn't supposed to speak. But I can't watch Joy die. I'd rather lose the riches than lose my child." Rebecca stood, her voice steady. "There's one place we must go now." "Where?" Daniel asked. "My church," she said. "Pastor Michael. He'll know what to do." Grace closed her eyes. She wasn't sure if God still listened to her. But at that point, she was willing to try. The next morning, the household moved like people tiptoeing across broken glass. Joy lay on a mattress in the living room, wrapped in a white bedsheet, her breathing shallow. The rashes on her skin had begun to peel. The doctor had come the night before, ran tests, and left shaking his head. "No medical explanation," he said. "It's not a disease I recognize." Grace sat beside her daughter, stroking her hand with trembling fingers. Tears streamed down her cheeks, not just for Joy's suffering, but for the invisible storm she had carried alone for so long. Mary knelt nearby, eyes swollen from crying. "We need to go," she whispered. Daniel looked up from where he sat, hunched over like a broken statue. "Go where?" Rebecca answered softly. "To church. Pastor Michael is waiting." The family arrived at God is Great Ministry by noon. It was quiet, no choir rehearsal, no clapping, just the weight of hope held tightly by those who had no other choice. Pastor Michael, a tall man in a simple white shirt and gray slacks, stood at the altar waiting. His eyes were gentle, but his presence felt like thunder bottled in calm. He motioned them forward. Grace clutched Joy in her arms. Daniel held Mary's hand. Rebecca walked beside them like a protective lioness. They didn't know what to expect. The moment Pastor Michael laid eyes on Grace. He inhaled deeply and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they shimmered faintly with something more than human perception. "There is a covenant here," he said softly. "A spiritual one. One that was sealed in tears and silence." Grace nodded slowly. "I made it," she said, "for them." The pastor placed his hand gently on Joy's forehead. He whispered a prayer, then turned to the others. "This isn't just about undoing a curse. This is about making a new choice." For the next 7 days, the family fasted and prayed. Grace slept on the church pews, not in guest quarters. Mary and Daniel joined the early morning intercessory sessions. Rebecca brought Joy every evening, even when her body ached and her spirit broke. On the 5th day, Joy stirred. By the 6th, her rashes began to dry up. And on the 7th morning, Pastor Michael stood before the family and said, "You must make one final decision." They leaned forward. "You must let go of every gain tied to the covenant. The house, the farm, the job, the comfort. Walk away from it all. Begin again from a place where God, not a forest shrine, writes your story." Silence fell like a rock. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Walk away from everything? From the business I built." Mary looked down. "But what about the savings?" "There's no salvation in stolen soil," the pastor replied. "What grew from darkness cannot flourish in light." Grace knelt on the altar steps. "If it means their freedom," she whispered, "take it all." Daniel slowly stepped beside her. "If Mama can give up everything, I can too." Mary followed. Rebecca bent her knees. Even Joy, now sitting up, whispered, "I don't want riches that hurt Mama." And so the decision was made. 2 days later, the family moved out of the mansion. Daniel handed the house over to the church to be used for orphan care. He shut down the company account and donated the remaining funds to help widows in Ugbekun. Mary called her employer and officially resigned, explaining that her path had changed. They had nothing but clothes in 2 suitcases and a Bible tucked under Grace's arm, but they had each other. And somehow that felt like enough. A week later, as if heaven had been waiting for their surrender, miracles began to unfold. Joy's skin cleared completely. She danced again, sang in the youth choir, and told people, "My scars are proof that love fought for me." Mary received a call from a new employer. A Christian-owned logistics company had reviewed her profile through Pastor Michael's recommendation. She was offered a better salary, a managerial position, and an apartment in town. Daniel was introduced to Brother James, a deacon in the church who ran a massive agro-processing company. After one meeting, he was offered a partnership role and given a fresh plot of land to restart a farming business, this time with no spiritual debts. And Grace? She no longer begged. She lived in a modest home provided by the church's charity board. She wore soft gowns with floral prints. Her feet were no longer cracked. She sang again. Each Sunday, she sat at the front pew, holding a tambourine and humming songs of thanksgiving. One Sunday, Pastor Michael called her forward. He told her story without naming names, and the entire church stood and clapped. He pointed at her and said, "This woman gave up comfort, dignity, and pride so her children could rise. But the God who saw her tears in the dust has restored her joy in the light." Grace lifted her hands, her voice breaking. "Thank you, God. I gave up the world, but you gave me back my life." That afternoon, the family gathered at home, dressed in white and gold. Mary served rice. Daniel played with Joy in the backyard. Rebecca rocked a baby girl in her arms, their newborn daughter, whom they had named Hope. They laughed. They prayed. They told stories about how far they had come. At one point, Daniel walked over to his mother. "Mama," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder, "you suffered for us, and I didn't understand. I thought I was saving you, but all this time, you were saving us." Grace smiled, tears shimmering in her eyes. "You finally understand," she whispered. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to lean into his embrace, not as a beggar, not as a secret martyr, but as a mother, home at last. The morning sun cast a golden hue over the rooftops of the church estate, where peace no longer came in whispers but in loud, vibrant praise. It was Sunday, a day of rejoicing, but today held something even more sacred. Inside the modest house provided by the church, Grace stood before a small mirror, adjusting the golden scarf on her head. Her gown was white, embroidered with silver lace, a gift from Rebecca. For the first time in many years, she looked like the woman she once was, the woman Edward had married. Her back was no longer bent from pain, her face no longer shadowed by grief. From the other room came laughter. Little Hope, Rebecca and Daniel's baby, was clapping her tiny hands while Joy sang her a lullaby. Mary was brushing her hair, her phone buzzing with congratulatory messages about her recent promotion. Daniel, now back on his feet, was gathering the offering envelopes, looking both proud and humbled. His new farm was expanding faster than expected, and this time he knew the foundation was clean. No curses beneath the soil, no blood behind the blessings. "Mama," he called gently, "it's time." Grace stepped out into the corridor, her eyes misting as she looked at her 3 children, no longer broken, no longer begging for hope. They had become everything she dreamed of. The church auditorium was already buzzing by the time they arrived. Ushers in green and white uniforms directed guests to their seats. The choirs sang in harmony, their voices filling the air like wings lifting prayers to heaven. Pastor Michael stood by the altar, dressed in a simple white robe, waiting with a knowing smile. Today was Thanksgiving Sunday. As the worship songs reached a crescendo, Pastor Michael lifted his microphone. "Church, we have a special family today, one that has seen both dust and destiny. They came to us broken, but God has made them whole. Please welcome Sister Grace and her family." The entire congregation rose to their feet. Grace, Daniel, Mary, Joy, Rebecca, and baby Hope walked slowly down the aisle, all dressed in white and gold. Tambourines rattled, feet danced, hands clapped. The choir erupted into, "Musical note, he has done it for me. He has done it for me. What my mother cannot do, he has done it for me." Musical note. Some in the crowd wept. Others just watched in awe. At the altar, Pastor Michael raised his hands and blessed them. One by one, he laid hands on each member of the family. When he got to Grace, he paused. "Sister Grace," he said softly, "do you have a word for the church?" She stepped forward slowly, the microphone trembling in her hands, but her voice was strong. "I once begged on the street, not because I was mad, but because I loved too deeply," she began. "I went into darkness, thinking I was helping my children. I gave everything, my comfort, my dignity, my name, but I learned that any blessing built on silence and pain cannot last." She paused, looking around the crowd, many of them holding back tears. "But God, the same God I thought had forgotten me, he found me in the dust. He wiped my tears. He restored what I never thought I would see again." She turned to Daniel, Mary, and Joy. "My children, I am sorry for keeping secrets, but everything I did was because I wanted you to live." Daniel stepped forward and held her. Mary hugged her waist. Joy leaned into her side. The congregation erupted in applause. That evening, after church, they hosted a small reception in the backyard of the church estate. Plastic chairs, coolers of jollof rice, bottles of malt. Neighbors and church members gathered to celebrate with them. Brother James, the Christian businessman who had helped Daniel rebuild, gave a brief toast. Some people build their legacy on money, others on sacrifice. But Sister Grace, you built yours on love, and love always wins. As the sun set and the final guest left, the family sat together on the porch, watching little Hope crawl toward her toy. Grace looked at Daniel. "Have you ever thought about visiting your father's grave?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, Mama. I want to tell him everything." The next weekend, they made the journey back to Ugbekun. The villagers could hardly believe their eyes. People who once laughed now lined the roads, clapping and singing. Some said, "God really lift the humble." Others whispered, So it was her tears that built their miracles. They went straight to the small, weed-covered grave behind their old mud house. Grace knelt down, pressing her hand against the soil. "Edward," she whispered, "our children made it. They're standing strong." And I finally rested. Daniel placed flowers by the grave. Mary and Joy stood silently, heads bowed. The mango tree that once shaded them still stood, leaves rustling like it remembered. In the months that followed, Grace began a small foundation, the Dust and Light Project, to support widows and struggling mothers. Rebecca helped her organize the paperwork. Mary volunteered on weekends. Daniel contributed farm proceeds to keep the work going. Every market visit now brought smiles, not whispers. Every new day felt like a page turned. Grace often sat outside their modest home in the church estate, surrounded by pots of flowers and children's laughter. Sometimes she would close her eyes and smile, not because everything was perfect, but because everything was finally real. One afternoon, Joy approached her with a school project in hand. "Grandma, I'm writing an essay titled The Strongest Woman I Know." Grace looked up. "Oh, who is it about?" Joy grinned. "You, of course." Grace chuckled, wiping her hands on her wrapper. "Then write this at the end of your essay. My dear," she walked through fire barefoot, "so we could dance on tiles in peace." Joy nodded, her smile wide. And Grace? She leaned back in her chair, the sun warming her skin, and whispered quietly to herself, "Thank you, Lord. I broke the old covenant, but you gave me a new one.